So, there I was, looking up what I had missed in Pokemon BDSP in the past 4 months, going through the usual venues of what's in the metagame, when an interesting autocomplete came up in YouTube search bar. I thought this might be a quick one-off expose, but there was actually a miniature rabbit hole painstakingly dug by one individual in particular, Verlisify. From just a rudimentary search, Verlisify has made at least 9 videos covering how the former Pokemon World Champion, WolfeyVGC, has been caught cheating on multiple separate instances. To preface this, I am by no means a competitive Pokemon player. I've done team building and showdown, and I know about IVs, EVs, and breeding. This makes me more qualified to speak on this subject than the average Pokemon player, but that's not a flattering metric. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to be taking most of what has been said in Verlisify's videos as the truth. This will be so that we are assuming a worst case scenario, but also because I haven't seen any comments disputing the factual validity of his claims. For those who are unaware, there is very little background info that you actually need to know about Pokemon for this discourse in heavy air quotes. Pokemon tournaments are official events held by Nintendo, where players take their personal teams into battle against their opponents until a single victor emerges. How do you get competitive level Pokemon? Well, you have to breed 1,000 babies and leave the imperfect ones on strangers' doorsteps, where they will either be tossed into the nearest forest or left in a basement. This is to get the best genetics for your Pokemon. After that, you need to have the babies commit genocide, so that they train in just the right way. Either that, or in newer titles, you can just void it to hell and back. Now repeat this process for however many Pokemon you think you'll need for complete coverage against your opponents, and you're good to go. Basically, it's a massive time sink and a general hassle, but many people do find this process fulfilling. After all, you're a Pokemon trainer, not a Pokemon commander. As you may have guessed, what Verlisify has accused/proved professional Pokemon players, mostly Wolfey, of doing is adjusting game values to get competitive level Pokemon without the grind. For such a clear-cut case, there is still discourse. First, I'll reiterate Verlisify's stance, which is that Wolfey and others have hacked in Pokemon through external tools. That is quite seriously all we can definitively say that his stance is, which means that it isn't actually a stance, it's a statement of facts. His videos seem to have been made primarily to inform, since he says to spread them around and get taglines trending. This could also indicate that he's doing this for views, but we'll assume that his character is decent. Now, you might infer that he wants some action taken against Wolfey and others, but there's contradictory statements, and I haven't heard the man himself call for any specific action. He regards cheating as morally reprehensible, and that is all we can say about his thoughts on the matter. On the other hand, the response has primarily been some variation of, "It's not really a big deal." This is backed up by saying that the rules should not distinguish between hacked Pokemon and their legitimate counterparts. After all, the hacked Pokemons could reasonably be obtained legitimately, with the exception of aesthetic differences like being shiny, caught in a cherish ball, or other cosmetics, which have no effect on gameplay. To clarify, the Pokemon that Wolfey and others are hacking in are not unobtainable. They are simply skipping the training process. Now, the astute among you may have noticed something crucial. Like almost every internet argument, the two positions do not address one another. Verlisify is approaching the situation as it has occurred. Wolfey has broken the rules of the tournaments he participated in. This is essentially non-negotiable. You are not allowed to modify Pokemon with external tools, which has been proven as having occurred. The response takes issue with the fact that modification is disallowed in the first place, but that does not mean that Wolfey somehow did not cheat. In the videos I've seen, There's a fierce war raging in the comments where some dude says, "Is it really that bad?" And Verlisify replies, "Bro, he cheated, stop simping." On paper, these are both defensible positions. They really don't have anything to do with one another, but each side could be argued. Verlisify's argument needs no support. Wolfey cheated, which demeans the integrity of the competition. The audience response of, "Does it really matter?" is also partially valid. As stated before, this by no means absolves Wolfey of cheating, but it questions the moral inclination to follow the tournament rule in the first place. I've seen comments on the side of Verlisify comparing hacked Pokemon to athletes using steroids, but I believe this is a false equivalence. See, when athletes train for competition, their training almost always mirrors the actual competition. In Pokemon, the training process and the battles are two separate skill sets. It would be like if to play chess, you had to carve your own wood pieces with the potential to be handicapped if judges couldn't easily identify what your pieces were. Because in Pokemon, EVs and IVs don't always have to be maxed. Do you know why? Because the competition will always assume that the EVs and IVs have been min-maxed, so there is contrarily some leeway in the training, hence the leeway with the wood-carved pieces in the analogy. The question is whether or not you feel that it is valid to mandate Pokemon training when it will not have bearing on the skill set used in the competition, and it really is a question of feeling, because, as stated before, the rules are clear. This is a question of whether you care or not, and the extent to which you believe that Wolfey cheating impacts your image of him. Now, as is atypical of most internet arguments, neither side has presented their arguments well. On the side of the audience, their phrasing of this relatively simple question can often be poor. They phrase it in ways like, "I don't see how this is cheating," when the rule is literally right there. With Verlisify, he expresses shock over poor reception when he insults the audience whose eyes he is trying to open. His insults may have been a response to initial backlash. I wouldn't know. The first discussions were on Twitter, and I refused to wade through that shitstorm. Regardless, my initial reaction when seeing his interactions with comments was, "Oh, this guy is to Pokemon what Technicals is to Smash." I mean, they both insult the people they're speaking to while having a savior complex of sorts. Plus, they seem to hate the communities that they are more or less involved in. Since then, I've noticed a number of differences. First off, where Technicals revels in backlash and acts like a supervillain getting a hard-on from the public's disdain, Verlisify just seems miffed. Verlisify seems to be rooted in the Pokemon community, where Technicals has more or less bailed from Smash. And Technicals argues with responses individually, while Verlisify seems to copy-paste the "it's the rules" response under every comment. But what if I told you that there is a snippet of information that explains why this discourse is still going? One that explains Verlisify's dogged persistence and abrasive responses. Enter the Pastebin I found in what I believe to be the first video Verlisify uploaded to his channel in this saga. And let me tell you, I did a double take reading this. You may want to stop and read the entire thing by yourself. I've linked it in the description, but the shocking truth is that Verlisify says, in his own exact words, "The problem is, I have a hard time understanding subjective ethical issues when it comes to people that don't follow the rules. Moral philosophy is a bitch like that. But in the end, I follow the established right and wrong and just go with what is happening." The Pastebin essentially details a conversation between Verlisify and WolfeyVGC that was done, I believe, in private, where the two attempted to come to a consensus. For those of you who missed it, he essentially said that he doesn't question rules and just goes with them while assuming that they're right. So this entire time, spanning at least 5 years, the audience's response of questioning whether or not it mattered that the rule was broken was talking to the sickest brick wall imaginable. To be honest, I've never heard of someone lacking a moral compass to this extent. There are people on either side of the follow the law debate, but you very rarely see people say, LMAO, I just follow them. As a minor note, I find it hilarious that in the description of the same video where the Pastebin is linked, he says, I don't understand this community's hypocrisy and ability to not understand right and wrong, after admitting to not bothering to question right and wrong. Is comedic genius. But anyway, I'd like to walk through this question of the inherent morality of rules for those who apparently may not have a moral compass through an example. To get footage from my Hollow Knight Lessons in Lore video, we used a cheat engine to disable the UI and character. Does this make me morally reprehensible? Well, you might say, there are no rules against cheating in Hollow Knight, so you're in the green. Then I'd say, WolfeyVGC used a cheat engine in Elden Ring to obtain cinematic footage, in which Elden Ring has easy anti-cheat as a mandatory package installation. Clearly, the developers, the rule makers in this case, were against any game modifications. So, is Vadi morally reprehensible for this? You might then say, well, the developers implemented this rule to prevent gameplay modifying cheats, so Vadi is in the clear since he only used it to obtain footage. There's a separate debate at this junction about dangerous precedent, but that's not the subject of this discourse. Instead, the directions I'll take this hypothetical dialogue is what the Pokemon World Championships rule makers intended when making the no modified Pokemon rule. Because if the tournament rule makers intended to prevent Pokemon with a competitive advantage like unlearnable moves, overmax EVs or IVs and the like, then Wolfey and the others have, by this logic, done nothing wrong. If tournament rule makers intended to prevent all hackmons, then we jump back into the debate of whether or not the rule should be applied to all hackmons. However, we don't really need to consider the latter scenario, because, according to the Pastebin, VGC has hack checkers which have never been triggered by the hackmons that Wolfey and other professionals have brought. As in, you'd think that if VGC gave a single shit about those hackmons, they'd incorporate them into their hack checkers, or take action against these people since this definitive evidence has been around for at least 5 years. So then, we can assume that the tournament rule makers acted in the former case, which means that Wolfey is morally in the green, and that the rule itself was just a general deterrent. The only ways we would not believe this is if you either believe that the tournament rule makers actually do want to crack down on all hackmons, in which case they are incredibly incompetent, or if you think that all rules are inherently moral, in which case, fuck you, Vadi. If you're curious about Wolfey's position, it is actually well defined in the Pastebin, and it basically boils down to what I've already outlined. He's not been confronted about it by relevant staff, and it gives no competitive advantage, so he really doesn't care. Of course, this doesn't really match up with his response video posted in December of 2020. We're in a somewhat weird spot where Wolfey hasn't given a statement or response to the newer claims, which means we can't be sure if he was cheating or not. Of course, he doesn't have to. He's already made the one, he says he doesn't want anything to do with Verlisify again, and he's sufficiently defended his character for his audience. However, it seems weird that he would talk about the morality of cheating in the Pastebin if he hadn't brought in hackmons. Also, there are some of the standard fare of atrocious defenses in the video. My favorite was the I have too much to lose defense, like, yes, I certainly didn't massacre that family of 5 in premeditated vehicular assault. I have too much to lose. Anyway, the most damning evidence comes from a Twitter account named Kafadix, who Verlisify says is the highest authority when it comes to hackmons. I have no idea if this is the case, but I'm assuming that is true for the worst case scenario, and the guy doesn't have much dirt on him. The absolute worst thing that you could possibly levy against Wolfey is that, assuming he personally edited in hackmons, he lied to his audience about it. That is an actual detriment to his integrity, and shows he values PR over being truthful with the group of people that supports him. To tie up some loose ends, I'll speedrun some of the questions you may still have, and if I don't answer one of the questions you have by the end of this section, feel free to comment it instead. Was Wolfey the one who edited in these hackmons? He comes off as a technological ignoramus, so you may have some difficulty believing this. Well, rejoice! I'm pretty sure that most of the tournament Pokemon he uses are attained by asking other people to train them up. What is the most damning evidence against Wolfey? In other words, is it possible that he has not used hacked-in Pokemon? Well, the strongest evidence of Wolfey using hackmons comes from Cafotix, who is apparently the hackerman whiz of Pokemon. He said that the generation values for some of Wolfey's Pokemon were impossible, which is about as damning as it gets. What's the deal with 508 EVs? This is not something that I spoke about, but it has come up in both Wolfey's response and Verlisify and Cafotix sort of exposés. Something you may not know is that stat points only go up every 4 EVs. This means that even though there are 510 allocatable EVs, only 508 do anything. Verlisify and Cafotix claim that a high frequency of 508 EV Pokemon is unnatural. Wolfey claimed in 2020 that it is normal for a competent Pokemon trainer to do so. I legitimately don't know if either is true, because I don't train up hundreds of tournament-ready Pokemon. Finally, do hackmons provide a competitive advantage? Well, they provide an advantage in the sense that you don't spend time breeding and EV training them, so you have a perfect Pokemon ready to go. There is effectively no competitive advantage, because perfect Pokemon are the baseline in competition, so it, in the words of Carl Jacobs, is getting to an attainable result faster. When I began researching this topic, my initial thoughts were that Verlisify was more or less right, but it was silly how vehemently he defended the rules. As in, it is a dumb rule, but it is still part of the rules set by the tournament, so it would be unsurprising if Wolfey were to be punished. The Pastebin really changes the dynamic of the discourse, so if you are invested in the story, I can't recommend you read it enough. It is statistically accepted that WolfeyVGC has used hackmons, be it edited in himself or traded, should we take Cafotix statements as truth. The debate is whether or not it is morally, professionally, or legally wrong to use hackmons in the manner that Wolfey is presumed to have, with the answer leaning heavily towards no. In this discourse, Verlisify posits that it is inherently wrong on all 3 counts due to the rule being in place against using edited Pokemon, and has maintained that position for 5 years. It's just a really asinine discussion that's been going on for way too long, and I thought I'd shine some light on it. Hello again, I'm back for post-commentary. So basically I did a search on Verlisify after the fact, and learned that in terms of credibility, he has no credibility. The consensus is that he's either a drama chaser or that he's dumb as a brick, saying that he doesn't hold himself to his own strict moral code. Still, I think that the video is useful, given that it operates on a worst case scenario, as in, what if someone other than Verlisify had presented this information and it was all true? There's no indication that Cafotix is a liar, so there's that. Also, in other discussions, the specific term used for hackmons that don't provide an advantage is gendmons. Overall, this might be beating a 5-year dead horse, but he does have a substantial following and managed to get a search trending again, so I think it might be worthwhile for those who are also outside the loop like myself.